From the Oklahoman newsroom, it's time for Thunder Thursday. I'm Jenny Carlson here in studio with our entire coverage team. Thunder beat writers Brett Dawson, Eric Horn, and columnist / newly minted Hall of Famer Barry Trammell.
Quit fooling around.
It's true. It's true. We saw it with our own eyes, right, guys? I mean, we were there. Oklahoma Journalism Hall of Fame. But we got Thunder stuff to talk about, and obviously, a lot going on. Exit interviews late last week. Sam Presti spoke to the media on Wednesday. You guys were there. Lots of news. Most notably, guys, let's talk about Billy Donovan. Brett, any surprise that Presti was so definitive with his decision that Billy Donovan was coming back?
Not much of a surprise. I think if Sam Presti was going to come out and talk to people, if he was going to be out in front of the media and addressing anything, he was going to talk. He's going to make something definitive about Billy Donovan. So either in or out. I don't think he was going to mess around with somewhere in between. No great surprise that Billy Donovan is back. If you look at the Thunder's roster, there's 4 teams in the NBA that have had roster turnover comparable to theirs in the 3 years that he's been there, the 2 off seasons that he's been there. All those teams are in the lottery. They're the only team that was in the playoffs. Obviously, they're in a very different stage than those teams are. But it's hard, and Sam Presti knows that it's hard. That said, he did stress a lot that the season was disappointing, and some of the things he talked about can kind of be attributed to coaching, not just players and not just front office. I think it's sort of an overall failure or sort of an overall disappointment. And I do think maybe that puts some people on notice, including Billy Donovan for next season. But I'm not surprised, given the situation that he's got 2 more years on his contract, not surprised that that's the way they decided to go.
Yeah, and continuity was a word, Eric, you actually wrote about the takeaways from Sam Presti's media availability. Continuity was a word. He really wanted some continuity, and there hasn't been much as it relates to this team during Billy Donovan's tenure. But he made the point, hey, I want continuity with my head coach, and that's part of it. What's your take on the decision to keep Billy Donovan?
Well, I think it's the right one. I don't think that the Thunder wanted to pay him, $12 million to go home essentially because he had 2 more years left on his contract. That would have been $6 million per year, and then also pay another coach to come in, and you're not entirely sure that another coach will be able to get the results that Billy Donovan didn't get. Billy Donovan, his first year, he had the luxury of having some really great players, but he also showed his playoff acumen in terms of being able to make adjustments. He's made Andre Robertson into a better player. I think we've seen improvement from Steven Adams as a better player and being able to utilize him. But look, some of this has to come on the players at some point in time too. Russell Westbrook's been a common denominator. They need to get more out of him in different ways. We've seen him achieve the individual achievements, get the triple-double average and become an all-NBA first-team player and be an MVP. But we've got to see different things for Russell Westbrook. Sam Presti talked about that as well, becoming a better spot-up three-point shooter. Presti kind of navigated around the defense part a little bit. We asked about Russell Westbrook playing better defense, but as much as we've asked from Russell Westbrook, we've got to see some different things from him in order to get the most out of this Thunder team. And look, Billy Donovan, he hasn't had a roster continuity, as you guys have said, and I think it's going to take a little bit more than just Billy Donovan being a better coach for this Thunder team to be better going forward.
Barry, guys mentioned the ownership. Sam Presti talked about, got to own this. Was that any future foreshadowing in your mind as it relates to Billy Donovan that, yes, Billy Donovan is back, but if they're talking about you got to own it, if there's another bad year or a bad start or whatever, did you feel like there was any foreshadowing towards what the future for Billy Donovan could look like?
Not necessarily. I do think Billy's under the gun, though, because look back to last summer or September even when they added Paul George, when they added Carmelo Anthony. I mean, the pretty clear consensus was, hey, Sam's had a great offseason. Sam's reconstructed the roster. It's back in the neighborhood of where it was when they had Kevin Durant. And the pressure that had been on Sam for a year suddenly was off. That means the pressure's on the coach to produce. You got a good roster. It's up to the coach to get something out of it. That didn't happen in terms of expectations. Only 48 wins, a first-round playoff loss. I thought this season was, in large part, Billy Donovan's responsibility for the lack of gelling, for the lack of defensive adjustments after losing Andre Robertson. So I think there will be a period where, hey, it's time for Billy to take this team and develop it. Now, if Paul George leaves, sort of the pressure shifts back to Sam Presti. So it's and if you say we're running in circles, just taking the responsibility away from one and putting it on the other to perpetuate jobs, I don't think that's the way it is. But it definitely is a shift. I don't know that Billy Donovan's any kind of imminent danger, but I do think it's his duty to get this team to play better.
You know, guys, as you think about Billy Donovan, I know a lot of Thunder fans out there would say, you know, there are lots better options out there when it comes to coaches. You know, right or wrong, there's that belief out there. But as you guys look at it, Barry, I think you even said a week ago or so that you didn't think that Billy Donovan was on the way out. Is this a case where people may be overestimating what the Thunder might be looking at in terms of a replacement if they had decided to do something? I mean, the idea that everybody but Greg Popovich and Steve Kerr, you know, anybody but those guys is on the you know, possible list. Is that a little bit of an overreach, Brett?
Well, I think it's more about the fact that kind of what Eric alluded to. If Russell Westbrook doesn't change, if you can't have an offensive system that is something beyond Russell does what Russell does, it really doesn't matter who the coach is. So the things you've got to adjust, the things that Billy Donovan has to try to get Russell Westbrook to do, they'd be facing that with any coach. And so you've got one who's under contract for 2 more years, who's built relationships here. Barring any sort of revolt by players, there's really no reason to change that if the sense is whoever you bring in is going to have a lot of the same hurdles.
Well, let's talk about Russell Westbrook, because now we've talked about him in a couple of different ways. Eric, we'll start with you. As you mentioned, Presti was asked about Westbrook in terms of defense. Can Westbrook change? Will he change? What's your feeling about, I mean, Presti seemed to indicate he will make changes. Will he?
Well, I mean, 10 years into his career, I don't think there's any reason to believe that he will. It's not that he can't or that he isn't willing to, but it's a matter of doing it consistently. I'm sorry. We talked about this all year. The Thunder mentions it every time they have a press conference, of consistency. These guys have done things well this season. It wasn't a complete failure. Like, you know, we want to say, you know, Carmelo Anthony didn't work. He didn't work, but it wasn't a complete failure. The guy shot 37% on catch and shoot 3-pointers. We saw them at their best, you know, playing this system or this style of ball where they were sharing it. Guys were moving around more. You're getting open shots in transition. You're able to get to the rim. And, you know, during that 8-game winning streak before Andre Robertson got hurt, we saw a little bit of that. We saw them have composed performances down the stretch. But it's a matter of doing it time and time again with consistency, and that's the question we have for Russell Westbrook. It's not that he doesn't already play at a high level. He does, and the Thunder's been very successful with him doing that, or they've been successful enough to at least make the playoffs the last 2 years with him as the main cog. It's just to a point now is, can you break through that ceiling? Is there a ceiling for this team with Russell Westbrook playing the style he does? It's a style that works because they were better than, you know, a good handful and change of teams in the Western Conference. They were able to qualify for the playoffs and somehow get that 4 seed with the way that things fell. But is there another level they can get to? Does Russell Westbrook have to make some alterations to his game in order to get them and unlock some other things within that offense? That's the question. One
of the things that Presti mentioned, Barry, was 3-point shooting. He said he's seen Westbrook working on that. I've long kind of thought about Westbrook as he relates to Dwayne Wade, a guy that was really a slasher early in his career, got older, had to develop the outside shot to continue to be a player that was valuable in the league. But I think we see that 3-point shooting that Russell's had to this point and say, I don't know if Russell Westbrook needs to be taking a bunch of threes. Is that legitimate that he could continue? Could he become a legitimate outside threat for the Thunder?
You got 2 polar opposite theories at work here. One is that a player in his 30s, Russell turns 30 in November, so a guy basically on the backside of his career is going to fundamentally change for the better. You don't see a lot of, not too many guys outside the steroid users start hitting home runs at the age of 30. NFL tailbacks don't suddenly find a burst of speed at age 30. NBA players don't suddenly become good shooters at age 30. So seems unlikely. On the other hand, we have seen Russell Westbrook do some amazing things with his career. Every year he's come back and added elements and done better and changed his game in positive ways. So the best way to make Russell Westbrook a better shooter is to tell him, Russell, don't even try. you're going to stink at it, so don't even worry about it. Take the summer off.
But look, every offseason comes with these questions. It's not just about Russell Westbrook becoming a different and better player. There's a whole litany of guys on the Thunder that you need to see more from. Can Steven Adams expand his game? It's not saying that he's going to start shooting a bunch of three-pointers tomorrow, but that was a big part of the Utah series. You're able to park Rudy Gobert in the paint. Gobert loves just sitting in the paint and waiting for Russell Westbrook or Jeremy Grant drive so he can swat him into the next galaxy. So can Steven Adams expand his game and keep those really tough defensive centers like a Rudy Gobert honest? And can he be a more consistent shooter in that 10 to 12 foot range, whether it's with a float shot or something else where he can facilitate from that elbow area? Can a guy like Terrence Ferguson come back next season and make a leap? Andre Robertson's not going to be 100%. And he believes that he can be back ready for camp, but that's a tough injury to come back from, a torn patella tendon in your knee. So Terrence Ferguson, we've seen a lot of rookies be really successful from this class. Can he be a guy that can take another leap, be a better defender, come back stronger? It's not just about Russell Westbrook necessarily. It's about the guys around him coming back as better versions of themselves too.
What if you guys could, best case scenario, tell Russell Westbrook or gift Russell Westbrook something that if he could come back better, different, what would it be? I mean, as Barry said, about to be 30.
I know what he's going to say.
Well, start us off, Barry.
Defensive discipline. Just do your job on defense. The truth of the matter is, Russell Westbrook is a phenomenal rebounder. What's interesting is the fact that he's gone double-digit rebounds to have triple-double averages for the entire year, the last 2 seasons, has sort of hurt his defense, has hurt his rebounding reputation, because there's an appearance that it comes at the cost of his defense. He lingers in the lane. He sort of sloughs off of his man looking for a shot and grab a rebound. He doesn't stick to his responsibility. Westbrook's a phenomenal rebounder, the best rebounding guard in the game, maybe one of the best ever. But he needs to stay home. He needs to do his assignment, stay with his man, cover the ground he's supposed to cover. That's going to help the Thunder. If he just does that, just that, Oklahoma City's defense is going to get a lot better.
Guys, what would you do? Brett?
Well, if there's one thing, and there's a million, but one thing that could make a really big difference for their offense, a small picture thing that might be a little hard for him as a guy who plays at the pace and the kind of aggressiveness that he does, he's got to learn to put the pass where it belongs more consistently. And I say this about a guy who racks up assists, and we know his assist numbers are great, but he's also passing guys out of shots, and he's got to get away from that. Look, you can make some bad passes to a guy like Paul George, whether he's here or not next year, we don't know, but a guy like that can make some adjustments. Guys like Alex Abrinas, Patrick Patterson, they need the ball where they need it. A guy like Chris Paul is a great example who asks a player, do you want it here? Do you want it here? Do you want it here? The pinpoint accuracy is so important to those role players. That's something Westbrook's got to do. He's got to stop passing guys out of great opportunities. He gets mad when you don't shoot it. He's got to put it in a position where you can shoot it as you catch it.
Eric, what do you got for Russell Westbrook?
Nitpicking the Russell Westbrook game. First of all, Russell Westbrook is a tremendous player. But, as we said, there are some tweaks that he can make to his game. I think just becoming a spot-up three-point shooter, being a guy that can knock down 35, 36%, and not just being able to do it, but do it with more frequency than he has in the past. We've seen him hit that shot. We saw it in the last game against Utah. It was beautiful, the way he just came off the left wing, curled off, Raymond Felton hit him in stride, and he just curled and hit that spot-up three. If Westbrook can work with the Thunder coaches and getting him more of those opportunities coming off of screens perhaps, getting the ball out of his hands so he can make some cuts and he can make himself, not just a guy who receives the ball in spot-up opportunities, but somebody who can take the attention of the defense and get other guys open shots by his off-ball movement. If he's willing to do that and work with the Thunder coaches on that, I think that can unlock a version of this offense we haven't seen yet.
You know what else he could do, Eric, if he did some of that? You watch Houston, Chris Paul screens for James Harden.
Yes.
Westbrook's not a screen setter, but if you got him moving off the ball a little bit and catching the ball, you could do a little pick and pop with him. It would open up a ton of different stuff.
All right, Brett, you mentioned Paul George. Let's talk about Paul George, because Sam Presti, even though he was asked about it, what are you going to say? He doesn't know. Nobody knows at this point. Barry, where's your, after listening to Sam Presti and all the things that have happened this year, where's your thought on the future of Paul George in Oklahoma City?
Well, I'm skeptical that he's going to come back. I mean, I think it's less than 50-50 that he comes back. I've sort of always thought that. This season not going as well as the Thunder would have liked it to certainly doesn't help that. I think there are reasons to think that maybe he'll stay. I think he did generally like it here. I think he generally did get along with the guys, and particularly Russell Westbrook. I thought they formed a pretty good tandem. I just think Paul George had his sights set on Los Angeles long before the Thunder came in the picture, and the only thing that's happened since then is the Lakers situation has become even better for a potential star in terms of they've gotten better. They've got cap room. They can do some things. It looks like the Lakers might be ready to step back into the NBA spotlight. To me, that makes it awfully enticing for Paul George to go where it's pretty clear that he's always thought about going.
Guys, we've already started to hear these reports. Experts, somebody close to has said Paul George is leaving. That's been a long-held belief. But Eric, do you think there's a feeling like it's more likely now as you start to hear these things? Do you just leave it where it is until the decision's made? You had a chance to actually talk to Paul George's agent. Any thought coming from them about where things stand?
They're not commenting on anything. They're just gonna, let the process play out. And what the big key for the Thunder and for Sam Presti and Paul's people is. I think both sides would say that they've had transparency throughout the entire thing. You can't answer to unsubstantiated reports or anything like that. But as Barry said, I think from the beginning, Paul George has had his eye on LA. Paul didn't shy away from that this entire season. And to his credit, he's been a guy who said like it would be tough for or not that it'd be tough, but most players, a lot of guys have that, that feeling of wanting to go home, and it would be an honor to do that. And I think that Paul's been pretty candid about that situation too, while also giving compliments to Oklahoma City at the same time. But as Sam Presti said in his closing presser, like there's always been transparency between himself and Paul's representation. I think you saw last season, going into the offseason, Paul's representation made it clear to the Pacers that he wouldn't be coming back after that contract had ended. So that gave the Pacers time to do what they needed to do and go find an appropriate trade. Will the Paul's group do that in this scenario? It's different. It's free agency. But I think that you can expect there to be as much transparency as you possibly could have in this situation, maybe even more than the Kevin Durant situation. Well,
and I was going to say that, Brett, to me, that's the biggest question. Does the Thunder, are they able, I don't know if leverage is the right word, but the idea that, they had to see the Durant situation out to the end. They had to just let that play out because you can't, trade him away on the chance that he's coming back. But obviously Paul George has made that Lakers statement known. It's out there. Does that change the calculus for Sam Presti in your mind?
I don't know that it changes the calculus because ultimately he's a great player. You can't trade him, or you could have during the season, and they opted not to because they believe that they have a chance. And that's still the belief. The belief is that they have a chance. And if you have a chance, as Sam Presti said in his press conference after the season, the Thunder as an organization in this market doesn't get the opportunity to sit down with guys like Paul George. You don't really get meetings with them as free agents. So when you have this opportunity, this chance to get him in for a year, put him around your team, put him around your fans, whatever you want to do to try to sway him in that direction, you do that and you take that opportunity and you hope that you can build on it when the time comes. But they're not going to give up on this until something happens. And really, they expected this to go to July 1st and a little bit beyond, and they'll figure it out from there. It's not like Paul George leaving frees up a ton of cap space. They're still in a tough spot there. So for them, all they can do is sell out for this chance for Paul George and hope that it works out.
All right, guys. This is, I feel like, extended Thunder Thursday, but lots to talk about because we haven't got to the Carmelo stuff yet.
Oh, that's the fun stuff. Yeah.
Which it was a little, I felt, guys, like it was a little bit unexpected, out of character for Sam Presti to be as forceful as he was in this situation. Obviously, Carmelo Anthony seeing a diminished role towards the end of the playoff series. He's got that buyout, and Sam Presti basically came out and said, it's either our way or the highway. Barry, what'd you think of that? What do you make of that? Where does that leave this whole situation?
Well, I think Sam Presti's laying whatever groundwork he can to sort of smooth the exit for Carmelo Anthony. The truth is, the Thunder doesn't want Carmelo here if he's not happy and willing to try to adjust to that diminished role. The truth of the matter is, everybody in the NBA knows that Carmelo Anthony is not the superstar that he was 3, 4, 5 years ago. He's not the ball dominant scoring machine that he was as a Knickerbocker or a Nugget. And, you know, what the Thunder tried to get him to do, and he tried to do it himself, not saying he didn't, was, you know, not to Carmelo's liking. That's pretty clear. Can't blame him, but you can't blame the Thunder either. So the Thunder is working on a way, clearly, to part ways with Carmelo, whether that's a buyout, whether that's to send him the message that, hey, maybe you just need to not opt into the contract. Wouldn't be fiscally responsible, but whatever the case, let him know that, hey, it's not going to be any different. In fact, it's probably going to be worse in terms of playing time and opportunities for you next season.
Yeah, and guys, I mean, we know what a factor he was in the locker room, Brett. I mean, we heard all season about how this guy really shaped a lot of how that locker room was. And you got to think, if he's disgruntled next year, it gets shaped in a way that nobody, you know, in the Thunder front office wants it to be.
Yeah, well, and it makes you wonder what would have happened if they had tried to bench him earlier, if he would have had a problem, if they had tried to reduce his role even further in, say, February or March, how he would have responded and what that would have resulted in. You know, Barry said, you know, maybe try to send a message to get him to opt out. He's not doing that. I mean, like, that's not going to happen. He's owed almost $28 million next year. He may take a portion of that in a buyout if that was something that, you know, if there was a situation where he felt like he could make up some of his losses in salary elsewhere. That might be the best case scenario for the Thunder and for Carmelo. But I think the one thing is clear. The message was pretty clear that, like, as Barry said, it's not going to change a whole lot for you. So if you're not willing to play that way, I think the message is you need to be elsewhere.
All right, Eric, look into the crystal ball and tell us what happens with Carmelo Anthony.
Oh, he's gone. But
how? How? There are many ways to get off the highway on the exit ramp.
He's going to opt in, you know, or he's going to, you know, trigger the option for the $27.9 million, and then, you know, he and the Thunder will sit down and figure out whether or not he's going to say, no, give me all of it, or he's going to say, you know, we can find a middle ground. Like Brett said, maybe they can get to $20 million. Maybe they can get in that range, and the Thunder can get him off the books, or not off the books, but, you know, just get him elsewhere and just pay out his salary either in a lump sum or they could stretch it over 3 years. Just really a matter of what kind of tax bill the Thunder wants to take on now as opposed to later. They'd probably be better off to just do it all in one fell swoop and get it done with this year. But no, Carmelo Anthony's not going to be back. And I actually kind of commend both sides for just the upfront candidness they had about it. Carmelo Anthony's been great with us all season in terms of being a professional. Sam Presti called him a professional. He did sacrifice. But at this stage in his career, he has to sacrifice because, frankly, he's a role player. And role players are the ones that tend to have to make sacrifices. He seems to be the one that doesn't realize he's a role player. But he's a guy who, you know, did what the Thunder wanted him to do. Sam Presti wants him to do it again. Carmelo Anthony doesn't want to do it again. That means he can't be here.
Barry, you wrote about Carmelo earlier this week, and the idea that obviously when the Thunder got Paul George, they traded away two guys that when you saw them in the playoffs, you thought those guys would look really nice in Thunder blue for the next few years, Victor Oladipo, Domantas Sabonis. But people are probably more remiss about the Carmelo trade because of all of the strings that are attached beyond this season. How much blame do you lay at the feet of the Thunder for doing this deal in the first place? Because Carmelo, I mean, that wasn't a must-do at that point. They had Westbrook, they had Paul George. What's your feeling about, I don't know if blame is the right word, but a lot of fans are really upset now as they look at that trade that it went down.
Here's what people have to remember. The trade really didn't hurt what the Thunder gave up didn't really hurt the Thunder. Everybody loves Enes Kanter, but Enes Kanter and Doug McDermott were not going to be difference makers. They weren't on a good, Enes wasn't on a good team in 16, on a so-so team in 17. Everybody loves him. He's a good player. He helps, but it's not like you can't play without him. It was a good trade. If it had worked out better, if Carmelo had more left in that tank that he talks about, it could have been really special. Just turns out it wasn't. Economically, it doesn't hurt the Thunder that much. The salaries of McDermott and Kanter are in the neighborhood. They're approaching what Carmelo was going to get. And yeah, Carmelo's going to opt in, but Enes Kanter had he has a $20 million option coming up this summer, and he would have opted in too. So it's not like you were going to get a bunch of cap space if you didn't have Carmelo Anthony. So it was just a trade that just didn't work out. It wasn't a terribly costly trade. The Paul George trade is the opposite. it cost the Thunder a lot. Victor Oladipo, Domantas Sabonis, really good young players. Oladipo becomes an all-star. The Thunder also got a lot. Paul George was a wonderful player, great offensive player, great defensive player. So you got to give up a lot to get a lot. In the case of Carmelo, they didn't give up that much. They didn't get that much.
All right, guys, before we get out of here, quick, because I know Eric would just like to talk about Donovan Mitchell's putback dunk the other night. Let's talk about those playoffs that are still going on. Who comes out of these two semifinals in your mind? Let's go rapid fire. Brett, who you got in the East Finals? Who you got in the West Finals?
I'm still in the West. I'm still taking Houston and Golden State. I'm not swayed by one Utah win, although Utah has been extremely impressive. You know, I still tend to think Philly is going to win that series. I think Philly is better than Boston. Boston also very impressive. And the most confident I am right now in all these teams might be Cleveland, other than Golden State. That win in Game 1 in Toronto feels huge and feels a little bit deflating for the Raptors.
Eric?
Yeah, the Raptors needed that win. That was a demoralizing way to lose, considering it's your first game at home and then you missed all those potential game winners at the end of the game. So I think Cleveland has that series. I am really torn on the Boston-Philly matchup because Boston's got some guys who are just playing their tails off. You know, they are able to just go through that first game and really battle. And you know, Marcus Smart's playing his tail off and battling Joel Embiid. I'm going to go with Philly just based on the talent, the overall talent from Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. And then, like Brett said about the West, Houston and Golden State have been on a collision course all season, and I see no reason to change my mind there.
Even with the Donovan Mitchell putback?
Even with the Donovan Mitchell putback. Look, Donovan Mitchell's a fantastic player, but Houston's got more bodies they can throw at him. They're a better defense than the Thunder's was, far better offense, and I think Utah is going to eventually succumb to that.
That's an interesting series, though, because you know you've got a team playing without Ricky Rubio still competitive. That's interesting. Barry, what do you got in the playoffs?
Oh, I'll take the favorites in the West, but Utah's not surprising to me. Utah's good. Utah is 29-6 to end the season. Now they went 4-2 over the Thunder, 1-1 with Houston. They're 34. What are they? 34 in 9 in the last 43 games,
awesome.
And 9 of those games are playoff games. So this is a legitimately top shelf team. I still think Houston gets them, but it won't be easy. And I would recommend that the Rockets win one time in Salt Lake in these 2 games coming up. I think Warriors win easy. I'm going to go with Philly and with Cleveland in the East. Boston could clearly get Philadelphia, though. That's a team that one team has a lot of big talent edge, but the other team knows how to play, has been there before, well coached, just tough. Philly, we don't know how tough they are.
I couldn't stop watching that Toronto game the other night. I felt bad for NBA version of our old buddy Anthony Slater missing all the chippies at the basket for Toronto.
Jonas.
Yes.
You're talking about Jonas.
I hope he's okay, because that was tough to watch. All right, lots more NBA going, lots more Thunder going. We'll continue to have Thunder Thursday throughout the off season. So be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.